Hello, and welcome back to today's episode of Twomey Time. I am your host, Megan, and on today's episode, we have a returning guest, Baldeep Dhaliwal. Baldeep is actually coming on today to discuss a little bit about her own New Year's goals and resolutions, and we're going to chit-chat a little bit about how we're keeping each other accountable to continuously work towards our goals for this year. For those of you who haven't watched my very first video of Twomey Time, I mentioned some of the things that I will be working on this year. My very first goal was to be creative, create something for myself outside of my profession, which is a nurse practitioner. And so this has been for me Twomey Time, which has been a lot of fun thus far. My second goal was to continuously grow my community and rekindle friendships old and new. Number 3 was learning to let go of the small things. And number 4 was learning to listen to my gut a little bit more. So Baldeep actually was one of my very first guests on the podcast, and she listened to my intro episode and mentioned that she had a lot of similar goals and resolutions for this year. So that's why I invited her on again to chit chat a little bit about how we're going to keep each other accountable and things that we have been doing to focus or growing towards achieving some of our goals for this year. So I hope you enjoy today's episode. And thanks again so much for Baldeep coming back and returning to Twomey Time. And welcome, Baldeep. Welcome back, Baldeep Dhaliwal, to the podcast. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Baldeep and I are going to just talk about some of the things that we've been talking about kind of over the years, and both things that we've both been trying to focus on quite a bit, and hopefully keep each other accountable as part of it too. So Baldeep, why don't, just as like a little icebreaker, why don't you tell us something you've been indulging in recently, whether it's like a good book or a show or even a movie, or just something that you've been really enjoying after, when you have a free moment. I don't know how many free moments you get, but when you get a free moment.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is slightly embarrassing, but I have been really into this TV show that I'm sure everyone remembers from their childhood called Desperate Housewives. When I was younger, I thought it was like this very scandalous show that like we weren't allowed to watch. It's not. It's like very good, and it's like about there's like a murder mystery, and there's all this drama, and it's like a very good show. And I've been watching it a lot.
So, right, I remember now. It's like bringing back memories with the house makeover show that was also on, like, and I think was Desperate Housewives. I don't know when it was on, but it's not a script. It's a scripted show, right?
It's a scripted show, yeah, and it's not reality. It was like I don't know, just one of those like Friday night shows or something. But I always thought it was like, quite a scandalous show because it's like, oh, Desperate Housewives, but it's not. It's about like it's like a murder mystery, and they're trying to figure things out, and it's very good. I was surprised at how good it is, but that is my little embarrassing thing that I'm
It's not embarrassing. I didn't even know about it, to be honest. I thought that you're right. I thought it was like more scandalous as well.
Yeah.
Not yeah. And sorry if you hear banging in the background. There's some construction going on below us, just FYI. But
have you been watching any embarrassing shows that will make me feel better about myself?
Embarrassing shows. What have I been watching? I'm so into Love on the Spectrum. I don't know if you watch that show. It's about.
Don't, but it looks good.
It's good. It's definitely like a tearjerker. Yeah. I don't know why my partner and I love watching it together, but we definitely like ran through those episodes too fast. And then Breaking Point. I don't know if you're into sports docuseries.
No, I haven't heard of that.
It's like a tennis. I've like never really played that much tennis in my life, or per se like tennis.
Yeah.
I don't even really understand how it's scored, to be honest. But I don't know. It's like a drama about how these athletes go through kind of like their phases in their career, and this shows the stress and some of the emotional part of the sport, not just like the performance side, but also all the stress that comes with being a tennis perfectionist or being one of the top tennis players in the world. I think it's a very stressful sport, and I didn't really understand that. So it kind of follows a few players throughout many countries, and it kind of like follows them along throughout the Grand Slams throughout the year. So it's kind of it's like a mixture of like a drama, sports docuseries.
Sounds really interesting. No, I haven't heard of it.
Yeah. And then of course Love is Blind, but we will talk about
Oh,
that another time.
yes. And the new season that's coming out in like 2 weeks.
I know the Sweden one's out now, and I think I watched like an episode, but I don't know why. I was less invested, and I couldn't. I don't know. I was doing other things that I don't. I sometimes watch TV and then do something else at the same time,
Totally.
and then I forget exactly what I was. I'm like, did I watch that already, or
Yeah,
where did these characters come from? But
right.
Desperate Housewives is not on my list. I need to get it back on my list.
Unfortunately, there are just a lot of seasons and they're all like 45-minute episodes, so it's quite a commitment, but hasn't stopped me.
Is it very action driven the whole time? Because when I think about this, when I rewatch some shows that have specifically been on TV, I forget that this is before like screen recording or Netflix, and you had a
Yeah,
45-minute slot to
yeah,
tell your story,
yeah,
and that was it.
yeah,
And then you move on to the next episode.
yeah. It is pretty action like driven, and then it kind of does like the classic thing like TV shows used to do. It's like, oh, like the mid-season like cliffhanger, the season cliffhanger. So it just is also like weirdly nostalgic because I haven't watched like a TV show in I don't even know how long.
So, Baldeep, if you were a parent right now, what would you rate it on a scale of like PG 13,
Oh,
and R? Because I feel like I was with you. My parents were like, never,
I know.
ever turn on the TV channel to that.
I have a theory. It's because they knew it was like a good show that required investment and they wanted us out of the room so they could pay attention to the show. That's my new theory for why we weren't allowed.
Did
Um,
your mom watch it?
yeah, she like watched it and we weren't allowed to. So I thought it was like a bad show. If I was most episodes I would say are like PG or PG-13. There's maybe a handful that are like I would say like oh 17 like R or whatever, but it's like it's just a handful of episodes.
Yeah. Hmm.
So
Well, now we know Baldeep, and she loves her Desperate Housewives. So I didn't see. I learned so much about you these
it is
days.
like funny when you ask these questions because I was like, I don't think she's gonna see this one coming.
I didn't know what I was going to expect, to be honest. I don't know. I thought it would be,
Like a
I don't know, you're
book.
always watching some interesting TV show or a good book. You're always reading a good book. So I was like, okay, great. I'll get a new book to put on my book
I
list.
was
So
debating lying and saying like, oh, I'm reading this excellent biography. Then I was like, no, I'm not.
that's not nearly as fun. Do you normally read biographies?
I have some. They're like behind me, and like I have them. I find them a little dry, but sometimes they're interesting. But yeah,
Yeah.
I have not read a good book in some time. Yeah,
Do you do audiobooks, or are you physical
I'm
like
more of like a
reader?
physical. I like to hold them and like read them. I feel like if I listen to it on audio, I'll just stop paying attention. I don't know. Are
Hmm.
you more of an audiobook person?
I just discovered audiobooks like
Mm.
a month ago, except for I thought Audible was free with your Amazon
Is it
purchase.
not?
So I was just, apparently it's not. Apparently you pay for it. It's like 15, I forget if I think it's like $15 a month, and you get one credit a month. So it's like basically buying one book a month basically
Oh,
on audiobook.
interesting.
So you get a credit, and then you can purchase any book with that one credit. Some books are free, and then some books require a credit. And so I had a bunch of credits in there. I think maybe it was part of maybe your Prime package at one time, and they kind of included it in to hook you
Mm.
into it. And then I don't know, my sister and I share it anyway, so it's really not a big deal. But I
Yeah.
have actually grown to really, really like audiobooks, mainly
Oh,
for like commutes and
totally.
plane rides,
Yeah.
or to go on a walk and
Yeah.
you can listen. But I do enjoy the physical book. Like I think you miss some of the nostalgia with it, but
Mm.
also getting to know the characters, and like the if there's a map in the book, you get to like look at the map. And I did that with my last book. I did 50-50. So I would read and
Oh.
then stop it and then listen on my audiobook.
Oh.
And then I realized that I was so invested in the emotional, like voice caricatures, the
Oh.
like speech inflection. So sometimes it was weird at first to do the opposite and like train my brain back
Yeah.
after I already had a vision of what these characters like spoke like
Right.
just from the audiobooks. I know that sounds kind of interesting or
Oh.
different, but yeah, it was weird.
No, that makes
It was very
sense.
weird.
And then if you're reading it, then you kind of start reading it in that voice that you've heard and you're imagining them and yeah,
Hmm.
interesting.
Totally. I know. Well, because Baldeep knows more than anybody that I love to call people on my commute to work. Because Baldeep is usually on that list of rotating people that I'm calling
But
all the time.
I love it because it helps us stay in touch.
It does. I know it does, which is actually like a pretty good segue into what we're going to talk about today, which is great. So, for I live very far away from Baldeep, and we have quite a time difference, about 5 or 6 hours, depending on, I don't know, daylight savings and just where things are at. So for us, it's been, I don't know, it's been a while since we've seen each other in person, which is kind of sad.
Yeah.
But that's okay. We're gonna plan that out this year. But we do a good job, I think. Well, a relatively good job of staying in contact. I think we're definitely like phone. Well, I'm a phone person. You are pretty good at texting too, though.
Yeah, but I think I also like adjust. So like I know that you're more of a phone person, so I'm like happy to talk on the phone more too. And I don't know, I like it as well because you can get accomplished a lot more on like a half hour phone call than you can in like 3 or 4 text messages. So I
That's true.
appreciate calls.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that you are converting, or not converting, being flexible with your friend scene. But that's so true. You have friends that like to text, and then you have friends that are strictly more phone call based. I also think it's just so hard to find a time to have a phone call too. So like I totally empathize with that it is really hard to stay connected with some friends because you don't have, like, whether it's time change where you live or just work schedule in general. I mean, I know that's been a problem for us. Just, okay, you're only free on the weekends, but then with the time change and then you're doing stuff on the weekends,
Right.
you don't want to be sitting looking at your phone all day. So it's a hard mix.
It is, but I also think it's important. So like when we'll text to coordinate a time to talk, and I know you're like, okay, well, I'm going to be driving to work and it's going to be, 1 p.m. my time. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine because then I can just adjust a little bit and I can, make sure that I'm free at that time too. Because I think it's something that's really important that, especially as like we get older, like our friends are starting to move away, like we're all kind of living in different places, like we need to invest this time into friendships.
I know, especially as we age, I feel like in our 30s, or for some reason I feel the lot, maybe because I moved a lot, but in the last 3 years I've noticed that too, like this transitional phase where friends are busy, friends are like in their careers, they're doing their thing, and it's one, much harder to physically see them in person if you live far away from them.
Yeah.
It's like you have limited time off. You want, doesn't mean you don't want to see your friends.
Yeah.
It's just hard to coordinate that. And not that you lose, I mean, obviously you have the friends that you're closer with, or you obviously grow new friends, but
Right.
how have you found it to be, because I know a lot of your friends live on the West Coast too, so how have you found staying in touch with them, or what have you used as tools to kind of help you do that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with everything you said. It's been tough, and then especially just like over years, like I haven't lived in the West Coast for a long time now, so over years, like some friendships have kind of I don't want to say faded, but that's like the best word that I can think of. That, like, some
Yeah.
friendships have just kind of like disappeared, which I find really sad. So the friendships that I have still that, like, have lasted like over 10, 15 years, like it's really important to me that when I'm at home, like I try to make sure to see them. Like even if it's just for like half an hour or an hour or something, like I try really hard to carve out time to make sure that I see them. Um, I
Yeah.
try really hard also to like stay in touch with like texting, making sure I remember important things. If they've told me like I have a job interview, like trying to text them before and being like, good luck.
You are so good at that, by the way. Like, one of my, I don't know if I haven't, I mean, I've some friends that are really good at dates, but I'm not one of those people. I'm like, okay, we talked about this.
Yeah.
If it's the next day, I'll remember it. I don't know why I'm not as good at that, but you are so good. You know birthdays, you know important events. You are so thoughtful.
Oh,
At,
yeah.
like, you're a very thoughtful friend, but you're also one of those friends that just, it's like one of those times where sometimes I'll get a card. I'm like, how did she remember this? Or that was so sweet of her to send. It's just like a good friend to have. And I so much admire that about you, because
Oh,
I think that's really hard to do. It's so hard. Like, it's not hard, but it's hard to, I don't know. I find it more difficult.
I no, I totally agree. I find it difficult, but then like if like we're texting or we're talking or something, so it's so funny that we say that because like I have 2 texts I need to send on Sunday, so I've made like a little sticky note that I was like, okay, I need to wish this person good luck, need to wish this person happy birthday. So I'm like, so I'll kind of do that, like as I'm like keeping in touch with people. I'm like, oh, okay, so this, or like they have job interviews and stuff coming up. So trying to remember, I don't know. I know it's hard to do, but it's also like one of the ways that I kind of like to stay in touch with people as well. That it's like it kind of
Yeah.
helps me. I'm like, like, oh, good luck in the interview. Then after I can kind of find out like how did it go? Like, are you feeling optimistic? And then just kind of helps me feel like I'm still there, even if I'm 3,000
Yeah.
miles away.
No, that's a good point. And you're very good at it. And it just shows that you're very invested in your friendships. And we have to be these days. I feel like you could, if you're not scheduling a time or really if the friend isn't good at texting, it can be really hard. Or if they're not open to having phone calls, it can be hard too. If they're a big
Yeah.
texter, I feel like it takes a lot of time to text. I don't know why, but
I
it does. Well, it does.
It
It can
does.
take a lot of time.
And then
Yeah.
especially like I know you like have certain hours that like you're working and you can't be on your phone. Whereas like I mostly am like remote or in class and I can always like kind of like sneak in a text. Like you can't exactly do that. So I agree, like finding the tools that work best to maintaining friendships. And it might be different with different friends, but it's really important.
Yeah, definitely. How have you found? I mean, you've been in you have moved recently. I mean, DC to Baltimore, you think it is close, but it's still like a whole separate. It takes an hour to get into DC. It's not
Yeah.
like it's close,
Yeah.
especially if you don't have a car.
Yeah.
How have you found? Has it been hard for you to make friends now that you're more of an older adult in a working job that I feel like it's good and bad because you are constantly meeting people because you're TAing classes and you get to
Right.
know students, you get to be a mentor and a mentee, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I I agree. It is kind of hard to, well, kind of twofold. Like I find that it's very easy to make friends like in the Hopkins bubble. Like there's students,
Mm,
there's people who are working there, but I find it so hard to meet people outside of Hopkins, and it feels like very weirdly isolating. Like you're just kind of surrounded by people who all think the same as you, who are all interested in the same topics as you, which is nice, but it's also, I think, good to kind of hear from people who work in different areas and people who think
yeah,
differently than you. So um,
yeah.
I have found that to be a bit challenging. I know you have done your pickleball and like you're able to kind of like meet people through that. And done your
True.
not done your pickleball, join the pickleball, I believe.
Join the pickleball.
Yeah,
No, I mean that's been helpful. I mean, I'm so thankful. I think I was talking to Travis about that last night. I was just thinking, wow, like if you move to a new place
yeah,
and you work from home and you and your partner works from home, if you live with somebody or your roommate works from home and you move to a new city or state, you don't know anybody, and then you're not leaving the house
yeah,
to go interact with other people at a job. You don't, even if you don't really want to be friends with the people outside of work that you work with, but it's still like that sociability portion, which
yeah,
is important and also gives you an outlook to like an outlet to meet other people because you can meet their friends. And it is hard, even though it's also like a slower process, I feel, with adult friendships, just because everyone's busy
yeah.
and not everybody wants to invest in work friendships. And I think it's great that you get the opportunity to, that when you have that opportunity or
Yeah.
when that opportunity presents, it's great that you can have those friendships or even intergenerational friendships. I
Mm,
realize that a lot too, that at least in my field of work, it's pretty rare. I feel like it's rare for me to be working with other people my age. And
that's
so
interesting.
I've had so much fun getting to be friends and even like have mentors or specific like women intergenerational friendships.
Yeah,
I've realized that over the last couple of years is where I get a lot of joy in.
yeah,
So that's been super fun. I feel like now more than ever, because you're right, when you're in your bubble, it tends to be like people your age with other things that you're interested in, like
exactly.
similar likes
Yeah,
or not even, I mean, maybe not similar backgrounds because you're all coming from different areas, but
yeah,
you have something in common. And
right,
so when you get to the working world, you don't always, that doesn't exist. So it's kind of like there's always something in common usually because you're doing an occupation or having an occupation,
right.
but it's definitely a different way to think about friendships and also to make friends because you're also at different points in your life than when we were an undergrad or students.
Yeah. No, totally. I completely agree with that. And it's fun to, I don't know, like you might learn something that you would have never heard before. You might like pick up a different perspective on something that you would have never thought of before by having these kinds of like intergenerational or just, friendships with people outside of your workspace. And it's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. I don't know if it's maybe we're just becoming more of adults and having a broader outlook on life. I think I am too. Or even my
Yeah.
friend, like I find that my friendship, even with my parents, has changed, or my some even my friends from high school or middle school, like
Yeah.
whatever friends I still keep in contact with.
Yeah.
It's so special to have that and to see it grow too over the years, and
Yeah.
we're lucky.
I
So I guess we'll. Sorry, go
Oh
ahead,
no, no, I
Baldeep.
just said I agree.
Yeah. And that was part of like why Baldeep and I mean, we talk a lot about friendships and just having positive friendships that really bring joy to our lives and bring positivity and improve our lives. And I feel like that's so important, and keeping good friendships and having time or devoting time to keeping good adult friendships as well, because it's so hard and so important. So that's why we're kind of like talking about friendship, because I feel like we talk about it a lot and it's not something that's easy to do. So I think that Baldeep does a great job of it. So keeping sticky notes, getting reminders is a good way to hold myself accountable, which I need to do more. They have reminders on your phone for a reason.
I
I should
But
invest.
I was going to say, I think you're also not giving yourself enough credit because, I mean, you're very good at being like, hey, I'm going to be driving tomorrow. Like, are you free for a call? Or you're just like, pick up the phone and call. So I think that, is
Yeah.
also very, like, that shows a lot of initiative and a lot of like, I'm trying to maintain friendships too. So it's not just like
Yeah.
reminders. I feel like you take a lot of initiative and like, oh, I'm calling you because I want to and
Because we can.
because I
Yeah.
can. I think that's great.
Yeah, which is good. So well, Baldeep and I were, well, I know I'm going to be working on it. I think you're going to be working on it
Yes.
too. Sounds like you're always working on it. Both always working on
We're
it.
trying.
So
We're trying.
yeah, I know. But well, Baldeep and I were chatting because she was like, "Oh, I watched your goals video," and I was like, "Oh, thanks. Thanks for watching. That's big and listening. Um, that's kind of nice." And she had you had mentioned. I'm calling you she. You had mentioned that you kind of had some similar things. So that's kind of what we wanted to kind of chat about today. So the first one, I know we chatted about the friendship with like reinvesting in friendships old and new, which is both good. But we've also been talking a lot about the small things that don't mean anything, and just remind ourselves that it's okay to leave that behind and move on. So I don't know, what are some ways that you're kind of learning to let go of some small things this year?
No, I when I did listen to your goals video and you said that, that really resonated with me because especially in academia where it's like it's so go go go, like everyone constantly needs to be doing something. Everyone's like, "Oh, well, like I'm writing a paper, I'm submitting an abstract, I'm going to this conference." And I think it's easy to kind of fall into that grind of like if I'm resting, I'm being lazy. Like I should be
Mm,
finding something to do because I think everyone kind of has that mindset and people kind of make it a joke where they're like or if you ask like, "Oh, how was your weekend?" and people respond, "What weekend? I was working." And it just has become such a
yeah.
core part of like who they are. And I just really over like the last year try to move away from that and try to make time for myself to do things like trying to not work on weekends unless something's so urgent and really needs to get done because I agree with you like these things it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things like if I take another day to write a paper if someone
Yeah.
if someone turns in an abstract to a conference that I didn't because I wanted to take some time off, it's okay. Like, I
Yeah.
can't let that kind of stuff like beat me up. I can't beat myself up about that kind of stuff because over the last year, especially, I've
Totally.
just realized like it's more important to take care of your mental health than to boost your CV. And
Good point.
uh,
Good point. You're so right. Like I remember back in the day when I see my old like Facebook posts that come up and I'm like, oh my God, I never want to read these ever again.
oh
It's
my
like,
God, I make them all
it's
on
how busy
private.
were you?
Like the important ones, I make
Oh, they're all private.
private. Yeah.
It's like the reminder, like, when you sometimes it's like, oh, this day 8 years
Yes.
ago, you said this.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, what were we thinking? Like
Yeah. Don't
it
know.
was
I'm glad
you don't
Facebook
know.
reminds us so that we can delete them though.
That's a good point. I just feel that you're so right. Our culture is so stuck on doing things, constantly doing things.
Yeah.
And if we're not busy, that means you must not be important, or you must not be doing something, or you're seen like less than for
Yeah.
having time to go do
Yeah.
something versus being like, well, I'm just so busy. Like I definitely notice that's a thing. And it's not an attractive thing. Like,
Mhm.
why do you want to be so nauseating busy that you can't even take time to like take care of yourself?
Exactly. And not even like take care of yourself. Like, so this weekend, so I am seeing Drake this weekend. We're going to go to one of the Smithsonian's, which I'm very excited about. But I'm like, yeah, I mean, I could stay home and like probably write a paper, or I could like go and meet my friend and have a nice day. And
Yeah.
I would rather do that. And,
Yeah.
if the paper gets done a week later, 2 weeks later, it's fine. It's not a big deal. And if it never gets done, that's also fine. I mean, it's not going to be a groundbreaking paper anyway, but
Yeah.
like it's just more important to me to prioritize these other things and let go of this need to kind of constantly be on and to constantly be thinking, how is this going to improve my CV? Like, you know,
Yeah.
it just doesn't matter.
How do you think that's something you naturally came to the conclusion of? Because I feel like it is hard to come to that conclusion, to realize, like, why am I burning my candle at both ends? Like, sometimes
Yeah,
it's necessary, right? If you're trying to make ends meet, or
exactly.
you're definitely go through phases of that.
Mhm.
But do you, I mean, is it, obviously that comes from probably a perspective of doing that too much and realizing that like you don't have time for you, or you're not investing in the things that you like to do, or you're not allowing yourself time for
Yeah.
yourself so you can re-energize, so you can go back and be very focused. And we forget that that's so important. And I feel like it's also a learning process. I feel it's more meaningful once you go through it yourself, and then you look back and think, okay, well, how could I have made that better for myself in the future, or what changes can I make? Maybe it's like us getting older, or an age thing, or more of a comfortability in our profession. I have
Mhm.
no clue, but it's probably a little bit of everything, if I had to guess.
I would agree. It's probably just, I mean, I will say, yeah, I think it's probably easier to say, oh, I don't need to work on that paper because I already have like papers on my CV. Like, it's
Hmm.
easier that I'm like in a slightly more comfortable position. But I also think that a lot of it had to do with around this time last year, I was just so stressed out and so anxious about like exams that were going on with school and like what how I was going to be collecting my dissertation research, and everything was just so stressful. I felt so overwhelmed all the time, and I just kind of realized that actually probably with conversations with you too, that I was like, this really isn't healthy. Like, I can't just, you can't be at this level of on all the time.
Hmm.
It's not
Hmm.
good for your like physical health, it's not good for your mental health, and in the grand scheme of things, it's like it's doing more harm than good, right? Like, if it's stressing me out so much to, you know, go to a conference, like it doesn't matter if I went and like got to add it to my CV if it, caused me all this anxiety to do it. So I think
Yeah.
maybe these experiences of doing things that stress me out have just kind of made me feel very like, that's okay. Like, so there's actually an example, a conference coming up that is in South Africa, and I had a
Whoa.
yeah, I mean, it is kind of cool, but I had a presentation accepted to it. But I decided not to go personally because I was like, it's just too stressful to me to travel that far for a couple days and present something. And, there are other people who can do it just as well, if not better than me. So, I don't want to do this to myself. Like, I would rather take a step back, let someone else have the opportunity. And also, it'll be better for me not to stress myself out with that kind of travel and like networking and being there and being
Yeah.
on for like 3, 4 days. I find it too
That's so
stressful.
far
Yeah, it is
too. It's
really
not like
far.
it's, where was that? You went to, was it Thailand this year? You went to, I remember talking with you and you're like, yes, I'm flying to Thailand for
Yeah.
like 32 hours,
Yeah,
something
like
very short.
another crazy, yeah, it was just crazy. And then I think that experience just like really solidified that I was like, I don't think that the benefits I got from that were worth all the like stress of traveling and like the stress of preparing and like carrying things with
Mhm.
me and like moving a poster across the world. And it didn't feel totally worth it to me to do that. To add one line to my CV.
Definitely. And it's like taking agency for yourself again, and having, like, getting that back,
Yeah,
and also being okay with saying no to something, because
exactly.
it's not meant for you. It's not serving you at that moment. And
Exactly.
just being okay with it and not having too much FOMO while if somebody else goes, and
Yeah.
knowing that that was the right decision for you.
Exactly. And that's exactly what it is. It's just, yeah, just knowing that this is the right decision for me right now. And also, yeah, what you said about having the agency to say no, it is kind of tough to say to like your supervisor or someone else, like, really, it's just not the best time for me. But I think it's more important to me to just like have an uncomfortable conversation than to stress myself out to like a point that,
Mm,
it's not worth it to me.
yeah. And it's something that also comes with growth too, until you like go through it and you're
Totally.
like, you're right, like no. And then also being prepared to have that uncomfortable conversation, and just know that that uncomfortable conversation is a lot shorter than you flying to South Africa to present something
Yeah,
and then come back.
it was a lot shorter than a 24-hour flight. So,
Yeah. Oh, well, I think that's hard because do you guys get, so when you have the opportunity to speak at a conference, do you get paid to do that, or is that, do you still have to do your hours at work, or do you
yeah,
have to take time off? Like, how does that work?
typically, so it's a bit weird. We don't, because I'm a student, so I do not get paid to go to those conferences. Like, usually they cover your airfare and they'll cover
Oh,
your
okay.
like hotel stay for the days of the conference, or most of it usually. But they don't cover like your time. So for example, when I was in Thailand, I was still working. So at like nights and stuff, sometimes I had to join calls after a day of the conference because of the time difference and a lot of things I just missed. So it's not like you really get time off either. So you're kind of expected to do it all, which
Yeah,
contributes to
it's a
that
lot.
feeling of like being, burning at both ends.
Mm-hmm. Just not feeling in control
Yeah.
sometimes of your own life too, and that is really hard. So saying no more often when it's right for us
Yeah.
and feeling okay with it, obviously way easier said than done.
Yeah.
So kudos to you for doing that, and saying no and feeling good about it too, and not letting it get to you about like why you're not, that you're not going, and just knowing that it's going to be better for you in the long run.
But that goes right into your thing about like letting go of the small things. Like at the end of the day, this is a small thing and it's just you kind of have to let it go and it's okay. There will be a million other chances and maybe one will be at a better time for me.
Mm. Yeah, you're right. I guess it is a small thing. And in the grand scheme, it seems like when it's an opportunity, you're always like, oh, well, what if something comes of this? And just knowing that there's going to be other opportunities in the future.
Exactly. I think so, that's part of like the pull of academia that everyone goes to all this stuff because they're like, oh, what if like this is the chance and what if this is the only opportunity? And I not that I've worked in the field for so long, but I just kind of am at the point where I'm like, well, there will be another opportunity. Like I don't need to,
Yeah.
you know, really be
So
so hard on myself.
are you submitting posters constantly as well throughout? So you have to submit individually to this, or is this the same topic you had last year, or is it a different topic
It's
that you
different. So
submitted
this
for?
was from a different project. So the Thailand project was about like that. Ooh, now I'm trying to remember. That was about vaccines and community health workers and like interventions to improve vaccine uptake.
Yes, yes.
So
Okay.
that was the Thailand one. And this project is still vaccine focused, but this is about vaccine advocacy. And this is a poster about introducing pneumococcal conjugate vaccine into countries that haven't yet introduced. And we targeted four countries: Chad, South Sudan, Somalia, and Guinea. So this
Mm,
poster is about like some data that we collected with those four countries about how to provide like advocacy like ideas and how basically to introduce PCV into those four countries that are kind of in unique financial situations and then also unique fragile situations with refugees and climate change and other priorities like malaria. So,
yeah.
so that's what
Is
this
it, this
poster
might,
was about.
maybe I obviously don't know enough about this because I'm asking this question, but when you get a grant and you receive a grant and you have funding for whatever your research focus is or whatever your project is, at the end, is it expected that you have to submit to these types of things, or is that something that's optional, or is that an expectation of a grant?
Yeah, it's kind of an expectation, to be honest. Like,
Okay.
there is this expectation that you'll write papers and that you'll submit abstracts and you'll present posters at conferences. It is kind of
Yeah.
an expectation. Then there's also, like they expect you to disseminate the results to the community, and I think that's like
Yeah.
important. But the
100%. Yeah.
all of these are just kind of like, yeah, expectations that are with funding.
But you guys choose where you want to submit to. It's not like the grant telling you, oh, we're going to submit to this committee or this organization.
Exactly, exactly.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, cool. Either way, you get a lot of good experience. And if you get to, if it isn't a good moment in your life to take advantage of them,
Yeah.
I'm sure you can meet some really interesting people there as well. So
Yeah.
I know because you presented in Thailand. How was that? Was that intimidating
It
or?
was it was okay just because it was like a smaller setting. So it was a little bit it was, I think, a little bit more relaxed. So I it wasn't too bad. But I know this conference in South Africa tends to have a much bigger pull. Like I know it's a lot more people that come and it's a much more technical conference. So
Oh,
and I went to it before when it was in Toronto. So I mean, it was much closer, much easier for me to get to Toronto.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
when it,
Makes sense.
yeah, so this year though, it's in South Africa, and it's just, it's just very technical. It's not exactly like a space that I feel totally comfortable talking about, like the nuances of PCV and like serotypes of pneumonia. Like it's not exactly my strength. So I'm like, well, don't
Gotcha.
really want to go, but yeah.
Yeah, because you went to Toronto. Was that I remember this 3 years ago or something, right?
Oh my
The
God,
Toronto,
yeah.
or was it
I was
four?
about to say no, it's 2021, and I was like, yeah, years
3 years.
ago.
I know it's flying by.
Oh yeah,
It is. I know you're almost done with your program, and so you're taking. We're both taking initiative this year. We're gonna say no to things
yes,
that we deserve to say. That's okay to say no to it, and be okay with saying no,
yes,
and not feel guilty about taking something on that's really only going to harm us at the end of the day, or our
yeah.
mental health or physical health. And knowing that it's all going to work out, and we're at the point in our lives where we feel good about saying that. And I feel like it's hard to get there, but if you can get there, or practice that, or just practice saying no to things, I think we can all be probably a little bit happier. So
It's self advocacy. Like you're advocating for yourself and for your mental health, and to like prioritize what you need. And it's important. It's a useful skill to apply to other things like job negotiations as well. So like practicing
yeah,
saying no kind of helps you with these uncomfortable conversations that'll be useful later as well.
true. And that's a good point. Like every bad or not bad conversation, but uncomfortable conversation you have definitely prepares you for the next one and the next one. And they never get, they do get easier slowly, but I feel like they're hard. Or even about like contract negotiation. That
Yeah.
is something I have learned to need to get better. It's like, do you just get better at it naturally? And it's just so much easier to counsel or to talk about it than when you're physically in the process of negotiating. Sometimes it's really hard. I wish, especially as women, obviously, I always try to negotiate you because I feel like, okay, I
Yeah.
have to, I must.
Yeah.
I can't always say I did, but it's also being in a lot of union positions, you really can't negotiate and you just learn to not. But I think it's still good practice to always put yourself out there, even if it's awkward, and it's going to be awkward. And every time it's going to be awkward, it's like practice makes perfect. You have to do it every single time until you say, you know what, I don't care if I look like an idiot. You have to try, because if you
Exactly.
don't try, you can't at least tell yourself, well, sometimes it's you're just doing it for you more so than um, well, you should always be doing it for you, but like your inner voice to say, okay, at least I tried. So
I totally agree. And I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no. And then,
yeah,
at least you tried. So,
yeah,
like, you don't feel bad about that. You're not like, oh, I should have tried to negotiate harder. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
definitely. I think that kind of like segue into like listening. So part of our last point that I talked about specifically for me is listening to my gut more. And I felt like I've been slowly learning that lesson the hard way. I think when I was younger, I definitely listened to my gut a lot more, my intuition. I just, maybe because it's all you have when you're younger and that's all you
Mhm.
have to go off of. And then I feel like I lost it a little bit,
Mhm.
where I was maybe getting a little bit too much into my head, or thinking, oh, when you change roles after going back to grad school, coming out of grad school, thinking about what type of position I should be taking, kind of like societal nurse practitioner norms. And it was hard for me to realize, like, no, this might not be what you want. And you have to, and I feel like learned a little bit the hard way about that and knowing what I want, but also it takes time to have the right opportunity as well. So also recognizing that sometimes, the opportunities don't come up right away and you just have to use all these growth steps to get to a place where you are feeling confident. And I think honestly, everything that worked out the way it happened actually was for the benefit for me and myself. But I definitely want to focus on listening to my intuition a little bit more and not caring so much about all these other little voices telling me like, oh, well, how's that going to look? What do you like? Is that going to affect you in the future? Like, you can't think about you can't catastrophize. If you catastrophize every little decision you make, you're never going to make a good decision or get
Mm-hmm.
a decision made. And a decision, sometimes a good decision is a decision that was made and not one that's like sitting in limbo and in turmoil in your head.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. No, it's so funny that you said that. Like, a good decision is a decision that's made. That's what they say a lot at Hopkins. Or like, a good dissertation
oh,
is a done dissertation.
true,
It's
because like you
true.
could be in limbo for forever thinking about
Exactly.
what you want to research. What do you want to
Exactly.
do your dissertation on?
Yeah. And then what topics do you want to write about? Like, so right now, like, I'm at that stage where it's like, oh, I have all this data, I could write so many things, and I'm just reminding myself, no, like, a good dissertation is a done dissertation. Like, I'm just gonna write it.
Hmm.
And yeah. But I totally agree with that feeling of listening to your gut. And I think I used to also be like really good at it. And I don't know if it was starting to, when we get into the workplace or something, everyone's so go, go, go. Cause even when we were living together,
Yeah,
like when I was working in consulting, like everybody was just also, so focused on like their utilization rates and working over 40 hours a week so that our utilization rates were over 100%. And everyone was very focused on that. And I think that probably like triggered that mindset in me too, more so than was already there from like, school that's, naturally there.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
going into academia as well, where it's just kind of like everyone's constantly like go, go, go. And then that to me just started to take over my feelings of like, no, I need to protect my own well being and setting boundaries
yeah,
for myself and, being kinder to myself. So I've been trying really hard to get back into that over the last year of like listening to my gut. And if I'm feeling like, this isn't a good decision for me, just listening to that and kind of being okay with that. Cause yeah, it's hard.
yeah. I think like academia in particular amplifies that. And I don't know if there's been any studies about this, but I feel very similar. Like in my grad school program, I was like, man, I am feeling way more anxious than I've ever felt in my entire life. And like, I mean, we all have anxiety. Anxiety is needed. It's a needed feeling. It's a necessary emotion for humans. And it's funny. I think it's when you're put in a very vulnerable situation and where you're going through a change where it just gets amplified to a point where I mean, that's what school is in some
Mhm.
ways. You're meant to feel uncomfortable because you're learning and you're doing something new. And most of the time, you're going to not be great at it at first. And it's going
Mhm.
to take more than one time to perfect it or to get better at it.
Right.
And when you're in, then take that into transitioning into a career field that you just went to school for or in academia,
Yeah.
it is still present. It's still going to be amplified for
Yeah.
a few years, likely. It's like the imposter syndrome
Yeah.
phase and that transition phase.
Absolutely.
It's gotta, I mean, I think I mean, that's just my feeling towards it. I think that maybe that has something to do with it. It's got to.
I totally agree with you. I'm glad you said imposter syndrome because I think that, contributes to this so much when we start a new job. Like, when I came to Hopkins, I was like, oh, I don't know, like, what I'm doing. All these people are so smart. Like, I need to
Yeah.
work 10 times harder to be at their level. And I
Yeah.
don't think I did. Like, I'm sure I was fine. Where I was, I'm sure it was fine. I'm sure I didn't need to stress myself out to the point that I did. But it's true. You feel like you don't necessarily belong in that space, or you feel like, oh, I'm just lucky to be here. And
Hmm.
I don't think we should feel like that. And I don't know if that's, from this, like, I don't know if men feel like that, but I know, like, as a woman,
Yeah.
I feel like that a lot. And, we probably shouldn't. We probably should know, like, no, I, earned this spot. I deserve this spot. But yeah, I think that feeling of feeling like an imposter contributes so much to this like need to be hyper productive, which leads to an increase in anxiety. And it just isn't like
Yeah.
good
It's
feeling.
hard
And
to,
yeah,
well, it's hard to like refocus yourself to away from that. It takes
yeah,
a lot of time. Like it took me probably a year and a half post grad to, probably longer. I'm probably giving myself some credit by saying a year and a half, but it took a while, maybe 2 years, to like come off of that. You're so right. I felt similar. I got into an extremely competitive program,
Yeah.
which wasn't necessarily something I like. That's part of why I struggled to even apply back to become an NP. I was like, can I even become a nurse practitioner? Am I even smart enough to do this? It's like all that self-doubt that gets in your head, which is like, so
So,
when you look back at it, it's
yeah.
just funny. Like you don't achieve anything until you push yourself. But
Yeah.
I'm like, I went to Vanderbilt. I'm like, how did I get here? Everyone here must be so much smarter than me
Yeah.
and more well equipped,
Yeah.
or had such great working experience. And just everyone, it just comes to the realization that everyone's journey is so different, and
Mhm.
that you're right, everyone's probably feeling the same way. And it's like then you get hyper focused,
Yeah.
and then it amplifies the anxiety. And like I definitely feel like coming out of that phase it took longer than I expected it to take. And maybe because it's like then you're away from that environment, and then you get to breathe, and then you
Mhm.
have to digest it all, and then think about, what did I learn over the last year and a half? Like, what skill set did I learn? Okay, why am I feeling this way? And then to unlearn that skill can be hard because
Yeah.
it's just on overdrive.
Yeah. I fully agree. And then there's also this, like, sometimes this idea of like you go out into the workforce after you've kind of been in this environment and I don't know, you just feel like, I don't know, you're not, maybe it just ties back into that imposter syndrome where you're trying to
Mm,
convince yourself that like you're worthy to be
yes.
there. And like you're
Yes,
worthy
100%.
of, or even while you're in school, like you're just having to constantly convince yourself, like, oh, I'm worthy of this. And even when I kind of on this about a year ago, when I started going on this, like, I need to take better like care of my mental health journey, it
Mm-hmm.
also, I was like, anytime I would take a break, I'd be like, oh, do I deserve a break? And it took a long time to unlearn that. Like, yeah, I do
Yeah.
deserve a break. And I also found that, like, when I go back to do my work, I'm so much more productive because I'm not burnt out and I've like had a weekend off and I've enjoyed myself. And then I'm not constantly working all the time. And it's, I don't know, it's just like important to remember we do deserve to like feel like we're good at our jobs and good at what we're doing. And we deserve to take breaks. And, it's, we
Yeah.
should be we are worthy of all of this. We should feel that way too.
And also have the space to do that. I feel that I mean, maybe it's just now, I feel like we both kind of went through that journey somewhat at the same time, like timeline wise.
Yeah.
And part of it is putting yourself in an environment where you're going to grow like
Mhm.
that, and surrounding yourself with other people that are mentoring you in that type of situation and are not feeding into this imposter syndrome or making you feel guilty about it, or really setting yourself up for success. So recognizing when an environment's really not working for you and that you don't seem happy in,
Yeah.
and just because it works for 90% of the other people doesn't mean it works for you, and just being okay with that and just saying, no, this isn't right for me. Let me put myself into an environment that I really feel nurtured in,
Yeah.
because that is, I feel like you have to have that comfort level first, and then the growth can really come from it. Because if you're constantly feeling that, the anxiety of imposter syndrome is definitely real. I think most people go through it at some point in their lives. But
Yeah.
if you focus on the negatives of that so much, you're going to just get bogged down. And so much easier said than done. But
Yeah.
I feel like I definitely learned that. And yeah, that was one thing that I definitely took from the past 2 years.
Yeah. No, I fully, yeah, nothing to add. I fully agree with all of
Yeah.
that.
So I guess our what we're trying to say is be true to yourself and be very kind to
Yeah.
yourself, but to also take time to really think about, what do you need as an individual? What do you want out of your work environment, out of your personal and professional relationships? Make those really, obviously some of them are natural and some of them might be stronger than others, but really focus on like how they are serving you and how you are also giving to them as well. So I think Baldeep and I both went through a interesting last couple years, but I've been so thankful for being able to talk with you about it and growing with you too as well, and keeping our friendship
Yeah.
authentic. If it's such a catchy term these days, but it's true.
Oh,
So
is it? Is that what the kids are saying?
I feel like that's what the kids are saying. They're all like, "Oh, it's your authentic self," but or
Oh,
maybe it's
no,
just
no. I
me, but
no, you're right. I've seen this on Instagram.
yeah. Yeah, probably Instagram, probably TikTok. Oh, we're being our authentic selves. So,
Listen,
but it's so true. You have
I
to
have
be,
a Stanley. This is as young as I'm gonna get. Like, that's
you did it.
yeah.
It's okay. My sister-in-law got me this and I like secretly love it. And I've actually had a lot of compliments on it, which is
Ooh,
hysterical.
very
It
trendy.
says tears of my pickleball opponents.
Oh my
So
god, amazing. See, supporting your hobbies, supporting your like getting value outside of work. I love it.
so true. Well, thanks, Baldeep, for coming on. We're so
Yeah.
thankful to have you back, and I'm sure we'll have you on in the future. But thanks for having some of these difficult chats and also giving us some insight onto what you're working on this year and why it's important to you. And thanks for coming on and being vulnerable and being your authentic self too.
Well, I loved it. Thank you so much. And yeah, looking forward to next time.